Hey, everybody. I've got
Hi.
a special guest on the channel today, and his name is Jack. And
Hello.
he's, I guess we've known each other for about a year now, going on a year anyway.
Yeah.
Jack, he's showing everybody your shirt. I want to get it out right away. Jack has a book, Fear to Freedom. That's the
Fear to
book.
freedom.
I'm going to put all the information below after the video, but that was the very first book that I read after reading Ray Franz's Crisis of Conscience. And it's a compilation of stories from EXJWs. Yes. And how, well, I believe there's a few other ones from a few other religions that are kind of mixed in with it, but most of them are ex-witnesses, and how they got from fear to freedom. And excellent book. I was telling Jack before we started to record that I read it in a couple days. So it's an easy read. It's really encouraging because it started to make me realize that I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. Right. And it's not a very big book. It's pretty thin. So, I mean, it's a good read. But anyway, so what we want to do today is we just want to ask, to start with, kind of get your story, find out how you became a witness. I know you were born in, so sure. Kind of tell me about your family and how that was.
Yeah, I was born in a religiously divided household. So my father was a Catholic, my mother a Jehovah's Witness. It was interesting to see both worlds, right? To see the Catholic side of my family and to see the Jehovah's Witnesses. I'll be honest, I preferred to be a Jehovah's Witness over being a Catholic. I didn't like going to church. It wasn't something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed a lot more meetings than the actual Catholic church. It just looked weird to me. So my mom had a lot stronger influence, and me and my three sisters became Jehovah's Witnesses. But my father did put up some fight against this. He wasn't so much against going to the meetings as much as going door to door. We grew up in a small village, so everybody knew everybody, and there was tons of family and cousins around. So, if we wanted to go to service, somebody would find out, right? And I would come and tell my dad, is like, oh, your kids are going teaching and whatever. And if he would find out, it would be hell at home. So we always had to hide. We always had to pretend after school that we're going to our friend's place to do homework or stuff like this. We had to literally hide it, right? And that really fortified our faith. We became such a strong believer because it's even in the Bible that if you are facing opposition or persecution, your faith will grow. So we had this common enemy, which was my father, right? Which brought us, me and my sisters and my mom, really close together. In a fight to fortify our faith and make sure that he doesn't break us apart. And this way, because we were such a strong believers and such a strong faith and such a strong fight, my sisters became pioneers. One served in Bethel. Yeah, I became an elder. We were all all in into this, right? That was not part of our life, that was all our life. The religion was basically a center of all our focus and attention. Without exception, everybody was very devoted, right? So that's my story as Jehovah's Witnesses. My sisters are still in. My mother is still a Jehovah's Witness. I was never disfellowshipped. I at one point decided, this just doesn't make sense anymore. I
want to ask you that. I want to ask you specifically. Sure. So what? Well, first of all, let's go to, okay, so you were raised in it. You did get a little background in the Catholic Church and whatever, so you get kind of a little diversity, in religion. Right. But you mentioned that you became an elder. So obviously you had to go up to, ministerial servant, then you could become an elder, right, whatever. So tell us kind of first of all, how long were you an elder? You said a couple of years. We talked.
Yeah, about a couple of years. It wasn't very long. It was,
okay.
I
long enough.
long enough to find out how the decisions are being made,
Right.
and basically to read the book for the elders, and that was enough. I think it was enough. I don't think by me being longer on the being an elder would teach me anything more.
So did you ever see anything, any judicial meetings that you felt were very unjust to where it bothered you, or you felt like you couldn't make those decisions and for somebody else?
Funny you asked that. I have to say that I was in a more liberal congregation than the ones I hear about. We had many judicial committees, and during the time, I would say maybe close to even 8 or 10 during the time when I was an elder, and everybody got private approval with one exception. And to the point where even on one incident, I felt like, oh, this person should have been disfellowshipped, and they didn't. The elders were a lot more understanding, I would say, than other congregations that I visited or had the privilege to be in. So I cannot say any bad words about any of the elders or any of the judicial committees that were handled, because pretty much everybody got away with being whatever took place, with one exception, because one exception was a person that did something criminal, and we all found him on the news.
Wow.
And we're like, oh, right then. Yeah, that's a pretty clear case.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so speaking for myself as a woman, I was in a few judicial committees since the time I was pretty young, a teenager. I got baptized actually when I was 19. So, between that time and I was actually in judicial meetings when I was younger than that, but just they weren't judicial. I guess they were 2 elders because you weren't baptized or whatever. But anytime I was in an elders meeting, whether it was 3 elders for a judicial committee or just the 2, I was telling you before we started recording that I was always very scared, very intimidated.
Yes.
And to the point where sometimes, I know my legs would just shake under the table because they made you feel that way. And I know that there's a lot of, especially women, I know men too, but a lot of women, my women viewers that have been through that, some of them, a lot of my viewers, period, are afraid of that phone call. They're afraid of, okay, I'm not going to the meetings. I've faded, or I'm doing something that I know if they catch me, I'm scared to death. What do you have anything to say that would help them not to have that fear?
Yeah, I think it's very important to address this subject, because I was very fearful myself, I have to admit. I was scared of the elders, scared of the reaction, terrified of anybody who was disfellowshipped, even if they were coming to the meetings. If they would look at me, I would be like, they're looking at me. I remember at one point, somebody actually got reinstated. Okay, this guy was disfellowshipped for more than 20 years. Wow. Started coming back to the meetings, and I missed one meeting, and I didn't even think about it. But then I walked in late, and then he comes up to me and he says, "Hi," and I'm like,
"You didn't know he got reinstated?"
And I didn't know he was reinstated, so I freaked out.
Great.
I'm like, "Hi," and then I just pretended I had to go to the washroom, and I just ran into the washroom, and then I'm like all shaking, like, oh boy, I just said hi to him, and there was an elder right behind me, and I was trying to be an elder myself. I was still a ministerial servant back then, so I'm like, oh, they're gonna hold it against me that I said hi to him in the middle of a kingdom hall. I'm like, oh, I was just going out of my mind, just so afraid of such a stupid little thing.
Right.
And then they told me, oh no, he was reinstated. I'm like, oh, I did not sin.
Yeah, and you said, I'll never be late to the meeting again. Yeah.
I can't explain you why there is so much fear, because people were literally afraid, not of the judicial committee. People were afraid of the visits that the elders did.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if the elders would come and say, okay, we want to do a shepherding call just to encourage you, people were terrified.
Yes.
No,
Yeah, yeah. Like, what did
my
we
wife said the
do?
same
What did
thing.
we do? Why are we
And if
getting a call?
there's
Yeah.
sort of a seer comes, oh my gosh,
Oh,
the guy
yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
he's even worse. I can't really explain this why. I thought that if I'll become an elder, I know more. Maybe, oh, maybe there's investigations happening
Right.
during those
Yeah.
visits. We're gonna ask certain questions to find out what's truly going on behind the curtain or whatever. No, the opposite is true. The elders were actually afraid of doing those visits. They were shaking their boots as well.
Interesting.
That was, I would never felt comfortable going to people's homes and trying to encourage them, because I felt like, oh, I don't follow all the rules, right? I don't always prepare for the meeting. I don't always have my hours high up and whatever. So you're afraid that people will judge you as a hypocrite, because you go in there to encourage them, right, from this scripture and that magazine and that article to do this and this and this, but then you don't always do it yourself. So then
Yeah.
you're afraid of doing this. So there was fear everywhere, fear of both on both sides, fear of the elders, and the elders also feared being, exposed of, oh, I'm not doing everything as I should. Because don't forget, elders were just regular people. They
Right.
actually were more on the pedestal where people were watching them, right?
Right.
So
under the spotlight all the time.
Yeah, if a regular publisher, goes and has extra few drinks, people are like, nah, maybe he shouldn't drink that much. If an elder does it, then like,
yeah, yeah,
he's an elder and this is what he does. So we felt a lot more pressure, and there was actually a lot more fear because of it, because there's more rules. You're supposed to be an example to the whole congregation all the time, right? And that created a lot of stress for them, and it still is. So people who are afraid of elders, they just simply don't know that the elders are also afraid, and they're also fear to fear. So this is why I wrote that book, Fear to Freedom, because I know that it was the fear is on every level. Some of my friends were Circle of Viziers, and every elder was scared of Circle of Viziers, because Circle of Viziers' job is to, check if the elders are doing their job, if they're doing, everything properly. And he has a checklist of finding out whether we're doing our job properly or not. But then he's being evaluated by the elders. So he's also afraid of the elders, because the elders could evaluate him wrong. So there's like literally fear on every single level.
So the elders actually, I didn't know this. They actually evaluate the CO too. They no kidding. I know the district overseer comes in, and sometimes they'll be in your hall at the same time. I didn't realize that the elders kind of did the same thing back.
Yeah, there's no more district overseers. That was there's no more.
Well, I'm talking years ago. Yeah. Years ago they had district overseers that would come in, but I mean, I don't know what they do now. Right. Wow.
They do that because certain circle overseers might not qualify anymore. Maybe they're putting their own agenda into the congregations. Maybe they're doing things not according to the wishes of the watchtower, and the elders can write up stuff that, they're doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing, and they will be removed or retrained, right?
Interesting. Huh? Who knew? Well, so inside, and take me inside of an elders meeting though. Like, again, most of us are horrified of being in one. When you're in an elders meeting, now we've both read Ray Franz's book, Crisis of Conscience. We both know what he says about how you think that they pray, there's Holy Spirit, there's this big answer and everything. I mean, take us inside of an elders meeting, and how does that feel? Do you really feel like a bolt comes down from heaven and says, that's it, you're supposed to do this with this person or that with that? Because I really think that the majority of people are afraid because they feel like something really big happens in those meetings, No,
it's just a meeting, and to be honest, it's the same thing. A lot of people are fearful, especially the new elders. They're just sitting there and just watching and listening, and they're afraid of speaking up or asking questions. It comes with time. When I became an elder, I lost that fear. So when I was at the table, it didn't matter for me whether the elder sitting across the table was serving for 20 years and I just started, I felt like we're all equal here, right? So I would question people, I would raise my opinions, I would vote against majority. I had no problem doing that, because I felt like, you know what, that, you know, if that's what I feel is right, that's what I'm doing, right? But a lot of people were still very fearful. What I am really grateful for being an elder is I found out how the decisions are being made and how differently they're presented to the congregation, okay? And that really opened up my eyes a lot. I'll give you an example. Let's say we want to appoint somebody as a ministerial servant, right? The first thing we would do is we would find out whether this guy is doing any microphones, any magazine, any you know, what are his hours? Is he a regular at the meetings? Is he married? You know, is his wife doing well in the congregation? What kind of opinion they have, right? Is he coming to clean up the kingdom hall? Is he engaged with anything like building the kingdom halls, right? We do all those things first. And if all the checkbox is like, yes, 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 yes. If that's yes, then and only then we open the Bible. And then we read the scriptures from the Bible that talk about the, you know, qualifications. And if we don't find anything against the decision that it's pretty much made, then everybody votes and says, yeah, this person is a ministerial servant from now on. And then they will go to the congregation and they will say, based on those scriptures, we have chosen this brother to be a ministerial servant. He qualifies. But I realized it was reversed, because to the congregation, we're saying, based on these scriptures, this person qualifies.
Right.
In the meeting room, we're like, we've decided that this guy qualifies, and then let's find the scriptures that match our decision.
Right.
Right. And when I realized that this is what's happening, not only with that decision, but with all the decisions, and there was literally one moment when we've decided to do something, and one elder said, listen, there was a scripture that says, and he read the scripture, and I was like, whoa, this scripture is like bang on. Bang on. It's like perfectly describes the situation. I didn't even know such scripture existed. And I'm like, we're not doing this, right? Because of this scripture. And then somebody says, well, there was this watchtower from whatever, he explained that this doesn't apply. There's a different explanation to it. And then he said, oh, in that case,
wow. Wow, watchtower trumped the Bible.
Exactly. And I was like, what?
Not that I'm surprised. I shouldn't even say wow, but I mean,
what had just happened, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, what's the authority here? So then I realized who elders really are. And I'm like, you know what? It's a corporation. The whole watchtower is a corporation. And he has a board of directors, and he also has managers, and elders are managers. They're not visionaries. They're not leaders. They literally enforce the policy. So we receive a book for the elders. The policy is there, and we have to enforce it. And that was the role of an elder, right? So for people who are angry at elders, oh, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that. The elders, they don't do much of thinking. They just have to
they're following a book.
The policy. Yeah, it's just like working for any company. If you're working for McDonald's has a policy and will tell you, you have to be here at this hour, you have to wear this kind of a t-shirt, you have to do this. And if you don't do it, you're fired, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a manager, you have to enforce other people to do it. And if you don't do it, then you lose your position, right? And it's exactly the same way. So once I realized that, then I'm like, oh, it's different than what I really thought it was. But that's their role, right? And they're also afraid. They're afraid because if they speak out anything from their own experience or thoughts that it's contrary to what the Watchtower teaches, they will no longer qualify as elders and they'll be removed. So they can't freely express themselves.
Yeah, I mean, they're worried all the time about keeping their position too. That's their main concern is, keeping their position and then doing what they're supposed to be doing, And then on top of that, there's lots of them, which I want to ask you next, that their consciences obviously start bothering them. Some of them. Yours, you got to a point where you couldn't rightfully stay where you were. So
Yes.
how'd that happen? I mean, here you are, you're an elder, you've been an elder for a couple of years, got, your whole family's in.
Yeah, that was really, well, it was traumatic for me, although I'm glad that it did happen. But at the beginning, I was like, I'm sitting, and they came up with this new understanding of the overlapping generation. And I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things I put on the shelf. There's a lot of things I'm like, maybe I don't fully understand it. But this, I was like, come on. It's like an insult to our intelligence, right? I took the Bible, and I'm like, okay, let me do the online. And I'm like, let me type the word generation. And I read all the scriptures that mention the word generation. And I'm like, it completely doesn't make sense with the understanding that they have right now. I mean, like, whoever came up with this purely did for different motive. It purely did it because they wanted to control people. They wanted to put the carrot in front of their mouth and say, oh, don't worry, it's just around the corner, right? And they came up with another understanding also with who is the faithful and discreet slave. They both came out at the same time. And that was a really big one for me too, because they said, oh, the faithful and discreet slave from now on is only the governing body, which for me, that was like, oh, purely they don't want anybody to question their authority.
Because where did that come from?
They are the only channel right now, nobody else. So that was one. And then second, they said, if we're together, then the faithful and discreet slave exists. But as individuals, we are domestics, which basically means, oh, if I walk up to Brother Let or Anthony Morris, and I would ask him, what do you think about this? Are you a faithful and discreet slave? He would say, no, I'm not. Because faithful and discreet slave is a collection of those guys, and he only exists when they're together. So I'm like, that means faithful and discreet slave only exists on Wednesday at 7 o'clock when you guys meet together, right?
Yeah.
That means that when Jesus returns, he has to come back on Wednesday at 7, because he's supposed to meet his faithful slave. And if he comes on Thursday, he ain't gonna make it. You know what I mean? So, and Eastern time zone. So I'm like, now we know the day when he returns on Wednesday, and we know the hour at 7 o'clock, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. So I'm like, you know what? It's literally done. It copies the corporate world 100%. Like, you have board of directors, not one director can make a decision for the whole of them, right? It's always collective decision. And then it goes from that down to your managers and people below you. So it's just different names, but it's the same thing. It's not a theocratic arrangement. It's corporate arrangement. It's just different names, but it's the same structure.
Right.
So when I realized that, I'm like, you know what? I know I'm not the only one that has those questions. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let me find out, what other people say about this, what other people think about this. But I had so much fear. I was like so afraid of doing any research online because of all the apostates, or they're all controlled by devil and demons, and everything is like so demonized. So I had to kind of justify it in my head, right? So the way I first justified it, I said, well, if I'm an elder, I have to protect the congregation, right? If somebody would say, oh, you know what, because I've heard about the book Raymond Friends. If somebody says, oh, I read this book and this is what it says, I'm like, I don't know this book, I haven't read it. And
so I better read it.
Always say, oh, if you haven't read the Bible, you cannot have an opinion about it, right? So I'm like, well, how can I have an opinion about this book if I haven't read it, right? So I'm like, okay, that's good enough justification.
Yeah.
So I locked my front door, I locked the door to my office. I closed all the windows, right? And then like my hand was shaking like this. My heart was beating like crazy. I was covered with sweat. And I'm like, I'm going to download this book, right? I don't want a physical copy. I don't want that demon in my home, but I want a digital. So just in case I can just delete it, right? But I remember my hand was shaking the mouse, and I'm like, something is wrong. This is wrong. Like, it's just weird that somebody like me, who's a grown-up man, is afraid of reading a book to that extent. I'm like, this is psychologically, something's wrong with this. So I didn't know what yet at that point, obviously, right? But I'm like, I gotta read this. When I started reading, I couldn't put it down.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
just reading it.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just go through it. I wanted to literally study it. I wanted to make sure that this guy is truthful and he's not, because we were told that all, apostates are liars and so
Right.
on. So I'm like, I'm gonna find out whether what he's saying is true. I'm gonna check the references. I'm gonna check the watchtowers.
I
And
checked the
scriptures.
references too when I read it. Yep, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that's what I did. I wanted to make sure that this guy is not, putting something over my eyes. So I was reading it during the meetings. I was reading during the elders meeting. I was reading at night, underneath the cover, my wife's sleeping and I'm like, I'm reading this, right? Scared she's going to discover this. I didn't go to work. I was like, just crazy, like engaged in this. Because I didn't want to talk to my wife yet. I'm like, if this is true, then there will be a huge shift in our life. If it's not true, I don't want to mess things up and then find out that it's not true at the end of the day, right? So I did very thorough research. I read both of his books, studied both of his books, some chapters several times. Then I read a couple of other books like the Gentile Times Reconsidered. It's a heavy book, but just the first few chapters are extraordinary. And just research. And then, you get to the point where like, you're literally convinced that it's not the truth and you have to make a decision. Right?
And wait, let me stop you right there though, real quick. This is an important point. You simply read books that were taken from their literature, really, because that's what Ray Franz did. He backed it all up. And you basically found out it wasn't the truth from facts. You didn't go to any, I know that they say apostate websites, which we know that what apostate really means, but, because this is how I learned it too. This is how I woke up. So I'm just kind of reiterating that you actually went to truthful things.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. So this is one of the books. This is it's in Polish because my first language is in Polish. So that's the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a Catholic Bible. My mom gave me this Bible and it says, read this one. What I loved about it, I studied, like just like Jehovah's Witness study with underlining everything and then all this. I went one page by one page, and here's what they have amazingly. Look, right underneath all this is notes, right? So few scriptures and then description of what things mean. And I read everything. I was just obsessed with it. I felt like I'm reading a book I never knew before. Like this was the first time. And what I loved about this is the Catholic Bible, is that the explanations to the scriptures that they gave, if they didn't know what it means, they literally put it there. We don't know what it means. We have more than one explanation. We have this explanation, and some scholars say this, some scholars say this. We don't know for sure. And I love that, right? Well, when you're reading Jehovah's Witness material, it's like black and white, everything.
Right.
The only gray area is the blood fractions. Everything else is spelled out to them, what they have to believe or not. So reading that Bible, studying that Bible, really like opened up my eyes even more and more. I'm like, I can't reconcile that.
And I think that's my point, is that's why we are, as witnesses, we're told not to go outside of jw.org, not to go outside of their publications, because we're not going outside getting things that are questionable, or, I didn't go on websites, and I know that's what they think we do. They think that, we go to these questionable websites where they're lying and all this stuff. No, you did what I did. I just took another version, translation of the Bible, not Polish, because I can't read Polish, but I took another translation of the Bible, and I literally did the same thing. I studied and I read it and highlighted it and made notes and was trying to make sense of things at that time. And it wasn't making sense because the New World Translation changed so many things that it's not even close to a lot of what other Bibles say. So I'm making this point simply because I know I have also witness viewers on the channel, and I know they do watch, and I know that they think that we leave because we find these crazy websites or channels, and that's not true. There are some of us that actually studied.
Everybody has to find their own path. My path wasn't the best path. I wouldn't recommend, anybody to follow my footsteps. I remember I was even afraid going to a library to buy a Bible because it was a
Yeah.
different
Oh,
translation.
sure. Me too. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I'm looking for the Bible and I'm looking over my shoulder. Is
Yeah.
there any
Yeah. Yeah.
witness? Because if they catch me buying a different translation,
I
they're
want to
gonna
know
be asking,
why. Yeah.
why do you need, King
Right.
James or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
So the fear is there. I would say, you know what? Feel the fear, but do it anyways. That's what courage is all about. You
Right.
feel the fear, you do it anyways because you know it's right. At the end of the day, if you find out that what you're learning is not true and Jehovah's Witnesses are right, after all your research, if that's
Yeah.
what you're convinced, great. But at least you have the exposure to more than one opinion and you did your research. But if you're too afraid of doing the research, you will always be stuck. You will always be at the mercy of what they will teach you, right? And when you're in it, when you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses surrounded by this bubble and you're doing all the meetings and the watchtowers and you're going door to door, it's almost impossible to see it objectively from the outside. It's almost impossible because even though we did so much studying, so many scriptures we read, so many books that they produce, everything is colored in such a way that critical thinking is almost at the level of zero.
Right.
I'll give you an example. I just made a recent video about this. Let's say there's an assembly, right? And at the assembly, there's a speech, and one of the speakers says, about the faithful and discreet slave, and then he will throw questions. So people will think, oh, he's asking questions, we're going to evaluate, find the answers for ourselves. But the questions are worded in such a way that he always knows what answer you're going to have before he even asks the question. I'll give you an example. Instead of asking a question like, how do we know, he would ask, for example, is the faithful and discreet slave inspired by God, right? Or directed by Jehovah? They wouldn't ask that kind of a question because there's two possibilities, rather yes or no.
Right.
Right? People start questioning whether that's true or not. So the question they would ask is, what proof do we have that faithful and discreet slave is directed by Jehovah? Right? And then that's a question presupposing that faithful and discreet slave is directed by Jehovah, and then people would start looking for what is the proof. So they would, at the end of the assembly, they would ask, well, what did you enjoy from the assembly? Presupposing that you actually enjoyed it, even though most people didn't.
Right.
Like what kind of blessings did you have? Instead of asking, did you have any blessings?
Right.
Right? Because that would answer be yes or no, but no. What kind of blessings will presuppose that you actually had any? So if you open any watchtower and you just read the questions, you'll see they all presuppose the answer in such a way that it always fits their narrative. It's never thinking, oh, is this true or is this not true? No, it's like, what are the proofs that we have of this? What shows us that this organization is guided by Jehovah? And then you're just looking for the answers that presuppose a certain answer. Right?
Yeah, it's like Loesch asked the question in a broadcast. Now, Jehovah and Jesus trust the governing body, shouldn't you? So,
right.
But there's no proof that Jehovah and Jesus can't come down and say, we trust you. But they put that in your head and then they're thinking, okay. Example. Yeah. So and that's just one of, that's how all these meetings go. That's how all the watchtowers are. That's how, so that's a really good point you made, that's how it all goes. It's all, and you literally, I was telling my husband this the other day, we would have literally had to sit at a meeting or at a watchtower study or study it beforehand and fact check everything in order to really know if you're being told the truth. Because think about how many talks were given, right, from the platform where they would say things like that. And your brain's kind of reeling going, wait a minute, did he just say that Jehovah and Jesus? So you're already far behind thinking, wait, how did, but you literally have to fact check that. Not that particular one, because that's a given. that was not even a statement he should have made, because we know he can't prove that. But there are statements that are made. They'll say, oh, so many people, or almost everybody that leaves this organization dies of AIDS or this or that. How do they know that? You literally have to fact check those things. You'd have to show me the numbers or what, and you can't. So, it got to that point where you're sitting there during these talks going, well, we don't know that for sure. And it becomes so that's kind of adding to your point, the same kind of thing, that it's just the way it's worded. You almost, I would sit there and almost just get lost in the talks because they weren't making sense.
Most of us did. Like, if you would ask an average Jehovah's Witness on Sunday, right after he left the meeting, what was the talk about? 99% of them wouldn't tell you. And the 1% that knows is the guy who gave a talk. Nobody.
Right. Yeah.
Unless it was abnormal, like somebody was maybe funny during the talk, or made a lot of mistakes, then you would stand out. But most people, it's just a blur. And it's weird. When I started, learning about coaching, went to different seminars, I couldn't believe how some speakers would catch your attention and keep the attention sometimes for days. Right? 3, 4, 5 days, and you're listening to the same speaker, for many, many hours, and you remember everything, and you're like so excited about what you're learning, and you go to the assembly, it's like,
that's funny that you said that. Well, that's funny because this is when I really first started getting a little inkling that I was waking up, was right before the pandemic hit. I went to Toronto. And I was in a 3-day women's coaching, seminar, all women, about 4,000 women in there. And what you just said is exactly what happened to me. 3 days of, I can't wait till tomorrow. I can't wait till tomorrow. And they were motivational speakers. And we had this workbook that you had to write in, and reading that workbook now just blows my mind because of the things that I'd written at it while I was there, because I was free to write what I wanted to and get it out. And once I got it all out and I realized some of the things I was writing was that I was being smothered. I wasn't my authentic self. I've never been allowed to be myself. I didn't believe in certain things, but I was afraid. I mean, it just went on and on. So, but you're right. The 3 days, I couldn't wait to get, and I was exhausted too, but I just couldn't wait to get the next day and the next day. And this went on, for 3 solid days. It wasn't like that at the assemblies.
One of my coaches, he said, when he was giving a speech, he said, when you're listening to me, take notes, but take notes only of 2 things. One, the things that you don't know yet and you could use. And second is that you do know, but you're not using yet, but you know that are of value, right? Everything else that you know and you're using it, don't write notes about it, right? Just focus on those things. And it was brilliant because, at the end of the seminar, you have all the things that are of value that you didn't know before, or you're not practicing it yet, right? So with the same mindset, I went to the assembly. I'm like, I'm going to write down all the things I don't know yet, or I'm not using, right? And see what I've learned. 3 days later, I'm opening my notebook. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
It's not 0. I wrote nothing.
No.
And then I was like, I was there with a pen for 3 days. I'm going to find something. And I'm like, I know this. I know this. I know this already. I know this. Yeah. Same stuff. And I didn't read 3 days later. I didn't read anything.
It got to the point where it was the same stuff, and you took notes because you took notes. You just took them because you needed to. I took them because I needed to do something, Right. I mean, I got to that point where it was like, I was writing almost everything just because I was trying to stay awake, I guess, Yeah, you were trying to stay awake because you weren't. And my husband said that too. He said, it was getting to the point where we weren't learning anything. Now, I was born in, he wasn't. He came in after we got married. We've been married 12 years, but he started studying right after we got married and got baptized. He quickly lost interest, but stayed in. But I mean, he hardly took notes either. I was always one taking notes, but I wasn't really needing to take them. I was just taking them to take them. But like I was saying, though, we talked about the fact that eventually it just gets to the point where you're not learning anything. You're not,
No.
you're just there you're spinning your wheels. You're just there to, So what is your story is awesome. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you obviously, eventually your wife, how'd that happen? How did your wife
It
wake
was
up?
very tough because my wife, there's something called backfire effect. So the moment you start mentioning anything outside the box, there's this wall comes up and my wife is like,
Yeah.
really bad things are happening in our home. And then, we got to study more. We got to read more Bible. We got to prepare more for the watchtowers, and we got to, prepare with the kids. And it's called a backfire effect. So I was always doing a lot more studying than her. All of a sudden it switched. Now she wants to do a whole bunch of studying, right, in preparation for the meeting and stuff like this. And obviously she put up a fight because she said, I've followed you on many paths, but this, you're all on your own. And if you keep going the way you're going, the very first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get disfellowshipped, and the kids, they're going to get married, they're going to leave this house, and you will never see them again. You'll never see the grandchildren. You'll never see the family. You will be an outcast. You want to be like that? Fine, but you're on your own. I will not follow you, right? And I was like, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Like literally had a very traumatic response to the whole thing.
Sure.
Where my mind, I felt like literally it collapsed. I wasn't able to make simple decisions, and I run businesses, so people would come and call me all the time, and they're asking me simple questions, and I remember I wasn't able to answer. I was like, I'll call you back. I'm just, I just, my mind collapsed, right?
Yeah.
And I had every single symptom of something called religious trauma syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
RTS, when I only learned about it later, but you went down to anxiety, panic attacks, depression, suicidal thoughts, all those things I experienced. I'll be honest, I wouldn't want to go again through this, but I view this as a gift because I can relate to people who go through this, because I can help people to go through this much quicker than I did. I literally tortured myself by not asking for help. I should have asked for professional help much earlier, but I was like, no, I'm not gonna go to any therapist because I'm gonna bring bad name on Jehovah if I start complaining about the organization and stuff. What if I'm wrong, right? And I'm just gonna go and tell, some stranger, about this religion, and what if that person will never join and never be a Jehovah's Witness, will never have the salvation because
it's all your fault. It's all your fault.
Right. So that was my mistake. I should have asked for help earlier. I asked for help later, and once you realize what is happening to you and how to get out of it, it's much quicker, much easier. And I think this is what I would encourage all the viewers to do. If you're on the fence or if you're going through this trauma, please swallow your pride, kick your ego out the window, and ask for help. It's so much easier, so much faster. Every single person in this book offers their help without exception, right? Because I specifically chose all these authors who went through this challenge and now they're happy. Now, no matter where they are in life and what kind of sacrifice they had to make in order to have the freedom that they do, they would never go back to the organization, no matter what you are offered. People lost their families, lost their children, lost their grandchildren, lost their marriages, lost their businesses. And they're, no matter what the loss is, they're like, I'll never go back. I'll rebuild my life from scratch, and I'll be 10 times, 100 times happier as an authentic self than to go back and pretend that I believe.
And that is an important point, because that's the point I want to get across to my viewers, that it is not just possible, it happens. I mean, we're living proof of that. We're happy. I mean, obviously your wife eventually followed you, because I know, so I mean, she did wake up, and
And for those, I think I really feel for those who are stuck in a marriage where two people don't believe the same thing and one person decides to stay and the other one goes, because most of these people live like roommates. You know, it's very difficult for them. Right?
Yeah.
You know, they cannot be authentic, they cannot be open, they cannot be vulnerable, and you know that intimacy is suffering. So I really feel for them, because for that I lived through it for couple of years. My wife didn't wake up like this.
Oh, wow.
It took years, right?
Okay.
So I started the research in 2013. I pretty much, it took me like 2 years, almost 2 years to get out of it. But my wife took until 2018, like 3-4 years longer. Although the
share with the viewers how, I mean, what did you, so what made her wake up? Did you leave her little things? Did you, because I know we've got viewers out there that
just
do
dropped
have
the book, and when she was sleeping, I smacked her with it. No.
Read this.
I would be kicked out of the window.
Yeah.
No, to be honest, she didn't want to read the Raymond Friends book. She started reading and she's like, no, that's not for me, right? And I'm like, okay. The only thing that I asked her to do is, see, I was a very strong believer in the blood transfusion doctrine, right? Like no blood transfusion, no matter what. I gave talks about it. I was teaching people how to fill out their blood cards, you know, like I was like, you know, Raymond Friends can convince me of everything, but you'll never convince me that it's okay to take blood, right?
Really?
I was really stubborn about it. So when I'm reading his book, In Search of Christian Freedom, there is one chapter about blood and life, right? And I'm like, okay, he convinced me about a lot of things, but this he won't, right? When I read his chapter, I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? So I'm like, okay, this is what I got to do, because we have kids, right?
Yeah.
So I printed that chapter out, and I told my wife, you don't have to read the whole book. I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm not asking you to you know, change religion or leave anything like this, but we have kids. And I know that there could be situations in the future where we might have to make a decision regarding blood fractions, blood transfusion, storing of your own blood, and all those things that could come in the future regarding our kids and even us. And I'd rather have this conversation with you now than when there is a need, right? So I said, I'm not asking you to change your mind. Please read this, because it expresses why I changed my mind better than I could express it to you. And then let's discuss it, and then we'll make our decision, not regarding you or me, but at least regarding our kids, right? It still took her at least 3 months to touch it, right? Because she was so afraid, right? So then we went on a trip, and I said, okay, just take the article with you, and we read it together. We read it together, and then as she was reading, she's like, whoa. I mean, it's so simple, logically, scripturally, medically correct. You can't really reason with that. Once you read this, you're like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. You're convinced. So that was the moment when she started opening up more and more and more. Obviously, the thing is, she wasn't in it because of doctrines. I believed that it was true wholeheartedly. So
I did too.
I saw that the doctrines were false. I'm like, I can't represent this.
Right.
My wife was in it for the doctrines. So she's like, if they don't have it right, the 607, the 19, I don't care. I'm like, I love the congregation. I love the people. You know, I don't have any other life outside of it. I mean, you at least running a business, you have interaction with people at work, but I'm a stay-at-home mom. I got 2 little kids. All my life is the congregation, right?
Right.
And home, and you. That's it. If you take away the congregation, I have no other life. Right? So she's like, I don't care about the doctrines. I care about my friends and family that I love. So that's why it was so difficult for her to leave. I literally realized that if this is why she's in it, in order for her to leave, she has to have a better circle of friends and family outside,
right,
than the inside.
Which is hard to do.
Very difficult. That's why it took so long. I had to literally rebuild a new community, show her, hey, listen, your brother's not a witness. Let's go visit him, right?
Yeah.
You're a friend over here, you know, also faded away. Let's talk to them again, right? And that literally started rebuilding that community. Now we have a lot more friends than we ever had before. So much better friendships, more authentic
Authentic
friendships
friendships. Yeah, I
than
agree.
we
Yeah, I think
ever
that's,
had. You know, I
yeah,
mean, I would never ever go back. And as a matter of fact, there was this moment when my family was not shining me yet, and we were invited to my friend who is not a witness, and they were invited as well, right? So, you know, he created this party. They came because they knew them as well. And I'm walking around the house and I'm listening to people's conversations, and everybody was happy. Everybody was, you know, sharing their stories about, oh, this is what my kids are doing. This is where we went for a vacation, and this, so like everybody was happy. And then I went to my JW family, and they're like, look how the world is bad. How, you know, this
yeah,
system is ending, and you know all the evil things that are happening. And I'm like,
yeah,
I just realized that I don't want to be part of that anymore.
yeah.
Like,
It
you know,
was a
I'm not
gloom
gonna
and doom all the time. Always
miss.
looking for the end. Always looking to die. Always, you know, always looking for the worst.
There
Yeah,
was nothing happy on the outside. You
no,
you couldn't possibly say, you know what, I found a cure for cancer. You know, I spent the last year on working on this, and I found a cure for cancer. Nobody would be happy, because I would
no.
say, you just wasted 1 year of your life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Could have been doing
yeah. You could have been
important things, right?
pioneering.
That's right. You know, like you just help people temporarily. They're all gonna die anyways, right? We
Yeah,
are working on the everlasting life. So no amount of success, no amount of happiness, no amount of good things outside the organization will ever be validated by those who are inside. And that is extremely important for people to realize when they're leaving, because when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're constantly looking for validation. You're constantly looking for affirmations of what you're doing right. So when you gave a little comment, you know, yeah, Jehovah is our God, right?
mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
right? And at the end of the meeting, and everybody's like, "Oh, great comment, sister so and so," right? And you feel validated, right? We were looking like little children,
yeah,
literally
right,
like little children looking for the validation. So when you're leaving, you're hoping that people will validate things that you're doing. You know, that they would be happy for your successes. That they will, you know, admire some of the things that you have achieved. Zero, nada, niente, not from your own mother. She will
right.
not be happy for your successes, because it's all in vain and striving after the wind. And people don't get this. And this is why they're getting so depressed. And this is why they're getting so anxiety, because they don't get this validation from anywhere else. They don't have the self-esteem that they can build. And this is why so many people are depressed, because they were constantly codependent, relying on the validation from the congregation.
But
And
there
when
is
they don't
that's
have it-
but then they have to back up, and that's what I had to do, is you back away from it, and you have to realize that the commendation that you were getting, like you said, the little pat on the back, what were you
Yeah.
really doing? All you were doing was following, like you said, the corporate bylaws. You were just following the corporation, but you weren't learning anything. You
Yeah.
weren't doing anything. You weren't achieving anything. And once you get outside of it and you start really learning the real truth about life, and you realize that, like you were saying, that circle of, oh, it's so bad and everything, and it's coming to an end anyway. When you realize that's not true,
No.
it suddenly it's easier. You know, in the very beginning, it's hard. But I mean, I mean, for me, you know, like we were talking before this interview, and I've been away for about a year now, and it's gotten easier and easier, to the point where I'm like you, you couldn't pay me to go back, because I know the truth now. I know what's real and what's not. But when you're in it, what's the expression? You can't see the forest through the trees. You can't see it, right?
Yes.
So, or is it the trees through no, I guess it is the forest through the trees. Can't see the forest through the trees.
But I would really encourage the viewers not to be afraid to do research.
Yep.
Even
That's
if
the biggest thing.
See, when you're a Jehovah's Witness, whatever you read, you have to agree with everything 100%.
Yep.
That's not how the world works. I read many books, many authors. I completely disagree with them. I even went to seminars and I argued with the speaker because I said, what you're doing is wrong, literally, because I said, this is what he was doing, right? And this is what he was teaching. And I stood up and I said, what you're doing is wrong. And it was great, because actually he didn't felt offended, right?
Oh, wow.
But people were very appreciative because now they saw two different opinions and they were to decide which path to follow.
We could never do that at the hall.
Oh no, that would be the end.
We didn't, we didn't have our own opinions. We didn't, we couldn't have, you couldn't have your own thinking, your own brain.
So I encourage people to read, do the research. Unfortunately, there is tons of misinformation out there.
It's not hard to find.
What I like about this, one belief that really helped me to outgrow the mindset of Jehovah's Witnesses is you never accept a belief unless you hear at least one opposing view, at least one. So when I adopted the belief as something very valuable in my life, and I realized I never heard an opposing view when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, I heard opposing view from priests and from Catholics or evangelical or whatever other religion, but I never heard an opposing view from somebody who actually was a Jehovah's Witness. And they would say, you know what, this is not for me. I'm like, what does he know that I don't? Right? Because for me, it was like, once you know the truth, then you cannot go back to the lies. So if you were in the truth, then why would somebody leave unless they want to have sex and do drugs and you live freely out there and do the bad things, and they find it too restrictive. But of course, they're on the white path leading to distraction. So why would I even bother with these people?
Right.
But I'm like, you know what? Let me find out what they think and disagree with them. Right? Let me just see what they say. And once you start really reading and once you start doing the research, you're like, holy crap. The eyes are opening.
Yep. That's why they don't want you to do it. That is 100% why.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us. Really appreciate having you here. Put your book up one more time. I'm gonna
Fear to Freedom.
Fear to Freedom. And so let's see. I have the book. I just have it on Kindle, I think. So I don't have it on the
basically stories of triumph after leaving high control religion. I did include people, one story from Mormon and one story from Muslim.
I remember that. Yeah.
And the reason why I included this because it's very important for Jehovah's Witnesses to realize that they're not alone on this path.
Right.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
And they're interesting stories too, those two. The Mormons are so similar and
yes,
some of the stuff.
And some people go through much tougher life, much tougher challenges than Jehovah's Witnesses do. There are still countries where apostasy is being punished by death. You just imagine what kind of a stress that would bring for people, what kind of fear they're experiencing. Just the question. So we're living in times where we can question our beliefs, we can question the authorities, we can question our religion without worry about being killed, thrown in jail, tortured, beheaded. That's a history of humankind for thousands of years. This is the only time when even a child can say to the parents, I'm not going to your church, and they're gonna be okay.
That's true, except for as witnesses, what happens, like my entire family does not speak to me. I know some of your family, doesn't speak to you either. So I mean, it's
what I'm saying. The worst case scenario.
That's the worst for us.
Speak to you.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's hard. I mean, I get a lot of emails from people that is hard. That's a hard thing to, to tell them how to get through, it's terrible. But
I'm not saying it's easy because it was very tough for me too.
Right.
What I'm saying is, if we have different perspectives, we'll see, oh, you know what? There's a lot of good things in our life. And this
absolutely. Outweighs.
You're going to look back at it from years from now, and you're going to be so happy that you went through it. And those are the living proofs of people who went through hell, and they look back on their life and they're like, I'll never go back, no matter what sacrifice I had to make. And that will be your path too. Sooner or later, because you can always go back when you think about it. If it's going to be so bad for you outside of the organization, you can always go back.
Right.
You can always go back. Start going to the meetings.
Right.
To get you in.
Right. But like you said, check out the opposing side. If it's not for you, then it's not. But if it is, and I mean, most people do that anyway because they're already struggling. You know, like,
Yes.
I mean, I don't know about you. I did believe it was the truth, but for many, many,
Yes.
many years, I struggled inside with so many things that didn't make sense to me, but I kept pushing them off, pushing them off, pushing them off. And then once I woke up, I went, oh, now it makes sense. Now I understand why it made me so upset to hear these little things, or it bothered me all the time. You know, so I
Right.
think a lot of us do that anyway. And when it finally all comes together, it comes together. But it's a journey to get through it. But once you get through it, I mean, it is definitely freedom. You know, you go from the fear of everything to true freedom, and there's no going back. So,
That's right.
well, thanks again for being on my
Thank you.
channel, and everybody, I'll see you all next time. You know what to do. Hit click and like this video if you do, and subscribe. And I dropped my email below, so let me know what you think of Jack and his story. And I'm also going to drop the information below about his book and his website. So everybody, I'll see you next time.